Hey.
That's Theran Knighton-Fitt. My name is Sean Lewitz, and you're listening to Something Shifted. Something Shifted is about change. It's that space between your head and your heart, but you can't quite put your finger on it. But your perspective on something has shifted, and therefore you've grown. Your life has changed because of it. Stay in the loop and subscribe to Something Shifted on your favorite player or YouTube right now. You're about to listen to the second last episode of this season of Something Shifted. Theran Knighton-Fitt, well, he's the youngest of 4 children. His parents had a dream to relocate the family of 6 to a commune in Switzerland called L'Abri.
And we were all saving up. We were putting our pocket money in. We had the graph paper where we filled out each block for each rand. And the plan was to go there as a family, spend a year in this sort of intellectual mountain community in the foothills, I think, of the Alps.
Around the time that Theran was 6 years old, his parents put their family savings together, and instead of leaving South Africa to go and live in a commune for a year, they bought a home in Cape Town, designed by architect Sir Herbert Baker.
Very, very prominent architect. He did the cathedral, he did Tynhuys, he did whatever little restaurant at the top of Table Mountain, very famous architect. And he designed this house, and it used to be the Danish consulate, actually. It was for sale. My parents decided, let's buy this house, had 9 bedrooms. Let's buy this house and create our own kind of community here in South Africa.
So that's what they did.
From 6 to 18, I grew up in a home that was way more than just the 6 of us in our family. Of the 9 bedrooms, my family took only 3.5. So there were up to 6 bedrooms sometimes that had other people staying in them.
The vision they had for the house was that it would become a vibrant community of faith and intellectualism and conversation. But as Theran says, in the South African context, it soon became a bit of a combination of all sorts of things.
My best description for the home that I grew up in from the age of 6 is that it was for many people, a bit of a halfway house back to integrating into society in one form or another. So we had a lot of people who stayed literally in our home with us, ate supper with us, shared our lounge. We didn't have our own private section. It was one home and we all lived in it. We had people who had, mental disorders or had maybe spent a stint at Valkenburg, our the sort of mental hospital here in Cape Town, and needed somewhere to transition back to get back to being fully functional members of society.
It's growing up in a space like this that has affected the way Theran leads his life and the work that he does around emotional intelligence, which is why I wanted to speak to him, and we can better understand the changes that we're going through and how best to serve ourselves and those around us.
It was a complex and complicated childhood that I think has formed me in so many different ways. I, at an early age, had multiple experiences of people feeling like they were healed, so went off their medication, and then, maybe for bipolar or something, and then you start seeing that shift back towards mania. So I grew up learning how to read the signs. I grew up with people, grown adults falling head over heels in love with my siblings. I grew up with, from a young age, quite I think, robust view of the difficulty and the complexity and the pain in the world.
My goal with this podcast is to help you become better at being yourself, understanding that we're all going to go through changes. We're going to face adversity, and we're going to have to come out on the other side somehow. We're going to be scathed. We're going to be scarred. There's going to be trauma. How do we grow out of that experience? So since Theran grew up in the home, surrounded by so many different people, personalities, experiences from such a young age, and he himself has said that has formed who he is. Theran is the Chief Humanizing Officer at a company called Mygrow, an emotional intelligence online platform striving to build a more emotionally intelligent world. And they've been doing so for the past 9 years. The passion he has for making humanity front and center in the workplace resonates so deeply with me. So then the next question almost begs to be asked. what is emotional intelligence? And are there a few signs of someone that has a high EQ versus someone that might have a lower EQ, perhaps?
You definitely can. Perhaps a definition would be helpful. What we often find with EQ is that nearly everyone thinks they know or they have a working definition of what EQ is, and very often they think they have high EQ as well. Everyone else has low EQ, but not them. But actually, emotional intelligence is so much broader than the average understanding, which is quite thin. The best definition, the best universally accepted definition of what EQ is, and the reason I say universally accepted is because there are multiple models of what EQ is.
Theran explained to me that much like we use the words car, vehicle, or ride, depending on where we are in the world, and while gas, petrol, or fuel are essentially describing the same thing, in a similar way, there are multiple academic models of what EQ is. And that's why he refers to a universally accepted definition.
There are different models of EQ, slightly different breakdowns of how the skills fall into place, etc. But on the whole, they all agree on this universal definition, that emotional intelligence is a set of skills that helps you manage yourself and your interactions with others more effectively. So it's two parts, and it starts with self. And both of those, that 1 and 2, is to do with your emotional life. And because of the broad involvement of emotion in so many areas of your life, emotional intelligence isn't just that simple thing of, oh, I know how to read the room, or I know how to, share my feelings, or whatever the flavor of, your particular thin understanding of what EQ might be. It's so much more than that. It essentially has to do with anything that the emotional centers of the brain are involved in. And as a result, it's actually a little bit of a misnomer to say someone has high EQ or low EQ. Of course, it is technically possible to be high in all aspects of EQ or low in all aspects of EQ, but it's much more common that in fact, I would say it is almost universal, that most of us have elements of our emotional intelligence, our emotional quotient, which are high and some are low. So it's a broad set of skills that have to do with how you see yourself. That's the self-management. So that's self-regard, self-esteem, things like that, all the way to your relationships with others, how you make decisions, how you handle stress. So someone might have really good stress management skills. And you can see that, to answer your question. You can see that in the room. Something happens, this person knows how to handle it in the moment. It doesn't mean that they have a high self-regard. It doesn't mean that they have a good understanding of what they are feeling right now. They're just able to handle this moment. They can manage the stress, and their leadership comes out in that way. Someone else may be very good, and you see this quite often, really, really good at reading the emotions of other people. Of course, it's an emotional skill, but they don't know what the heck is going on with themselves. So as I say, a little bit of a misnomer to talk about high and low EQ. Of course, these different sub-skills of EQ, many of them are very universal. They bleed into all sorts of things. So yes, there are people who across the board would have higher EQ or lower EQ, but you can tell as to more specifically answer your question, you can point out, well, maybe this doesn't answer your question, because maybe you do need to have a good understanding of all the aspects of EQ to be able to point them out. But if you can control your temper, well then, your EQ is pretty good there. If you can be empathetic, then you're high in empathy, an EQ skill. So you can tell, but like with everything, the more you know, the deeper you get into it, the more you can bring to your observation.
I read a lot of what you write, and I watch a lot of your videos, and I often feel quite moved by them. And there was something you wrote about life and work sometimes being a fight for survival, literally a mad scramble with fear of defeat hanging over you until that final whistle. And I was going to ask, how much do our core beliefs weigh in on the way our emotional intelligence develops as we get older?
So I would say, well, some of us think we know what our core beliefs are, but actually we're not aware enough to know what our core beliefs are. We might think, my core belief is everyone's important, but actually my core belief is I'm useless. That might be what's really at the heart. So we don't use belief language as much as we use identity language. For us, it's the identity you have, and it's not one identity. There are multiple identities, and they are always narrative. They are always the result of the story that has come before. So part of the work that is required to build EQ competencies, not just sort of a fake facade, not just something to put on to look like you can handle a situation, but that deep core work that needs to happen on the inside. Part of that is to really get to the heart of what are my, to use your language, core beliefs, or my core values is another sort of aspect or facet to that same general idea. What are those, and how did I get here? How did I get to this point of believing that I'm really the only one who deserves this promotion right now? Everyone else is useless or expletive useless, or whatever the narrative is that I've believed. And it's positive and negative. For many of us, perhaps most of us, it's more negative than positive, specifically because of the way the subconscious mind works by default. It works to protect you. And the first rule of protection is stay alive, don't get harmed. So that fight, flight, and freeze response, those are our defaults, which lead us to interpret so much in the story as if, I am not enough, or whatever the story is we believe. And the beliefs are a result of the story. And the story has led us to a certain place, which makes us handle situations or respond to different dynamics in certain ways. Maybe it's a fear of intimacy because I don't want to be rejected. So now my whole life is just one string of relationships after the next, where I break it off, just before. How many movies have been made about this exact dynamic? It's protection, it's self-protection. So the story leads you there. You might not actually know that core belief is a belief of I'm not good enough for her, but I'm unable to handle conflict, which is an emotional skill. I'm unable to handle that because of that core belief. So that's perhaps the closest I'll get back to the answer with that example.
Yeah. I've been grappling myself recently with core beliefs. Well, at least I think they're core beliefs, and trying to unpack them a bit. I did an interview not too long ago, and I was asked about some things that happened in my childhood, and I jumped immediately into bullying. And then for the next 3 days, I was trying to unpack all of that. Like, how has that actually affected the way I've lived my life? And the more I've analyzed it, the more I've gone, well, there's probably only like 2 or 3 people. But I was so young that at the time, it was my entire world, this bubble that I lived in. And then all of a sudden, you start to feel that everybody is doing that to you. And every instance is playing into that. And it does seem to have various ways of playing out. As you say, we might all experience a very similar thing, but the way we respond to it can end up being very different and become quite divergent from where we were and experiencing that thing.
Can I jump in just to give you a little bit of neuroscience on that? Because I think it's really applicable.
Please.
There's a tiny little section in the brain called the amygdala that there's 2 of them, little almond-sized regions in the brain, and they have nearly all of their neurons, which is essentially the cells in the brain. Nearly all of their neurons are dedicated to looking for danger. And the way the subconscious mind and emotional memory works is, if this was dangerous last time, it's better to be safe than sorry. So your amygdala is on high alert for anything that looks like what was dangerous last time. But, rather be safe than sorry. So let's take your example of being bullied. That kid who looks like that bullied you. So now the next kid who looks like that, now you're on alert. And it's subconscious, it's preconscious. It's not that you are being prejudiced against some guy who's, whatever, has brown hair, because the last guy who had brown hair bullied you. But that plays out with everything. It plays out with sexism, plays out with racism, plays out with so many things, where the amygdala is going to hijack the situation to protect us. So of course he is insulting me. Of course that laugh at the boardroom table when we're all talking about what we should do, of course that laugh is him saying I have a silly idea, because that's what I'm seeing now, because those neurons in that amygdala are just scanning the world and looking for danger. And it happens at a pre-conscious level and it tells your body, it tells your psyche, you're not safe right now. This is exactly the same way like PTSD works. It works to protect you. Now the car backfires, again, to use another film trope, and all of a sudden you're back in Afghanistan, fighting because the bombs that went off, now the car backfires, you know the story. Better safe than sorry. That's the principle that the subconscious mind works on. And another dynamic that really plays into it is that it is constantly looking for connection to tie things together to form a cohesive picture of who you are in the world.
Fascinating. Yeah, I can see a lot of those things playing out, especially as I've unpacked some of it in the last week specifically. It's very fresh. And it makes sense now if you're talking about centers of the brain that remember those things and then protect so that they don't happen again. You see somebody sniggering or looking in your direction and pointing, and immediately you go to, oh, they're out to get me. Avoid, squash emotions, don't show anything, don't do anything. And how that then plays out later, going, well, I don't share my emotions, so I don't process the emotions because it's easier to just pretend they're not happening. Theran, how important is it, and you're the youngest of 4, how important is it that you have someone that believes in us?
Wow. Yeah, great question. You mentioned I'm the youngest of 4, but my answer to you is actually through the lens of being a parent myself now. I've got 3 children myself. I just this morning came from a special assembly that the school does for each of the grades, and it's not a prize giving or something like that. It's more like a like a concert idea where all the different kids in the grade, and I was at my middle child's one today. All the kids have something to do. Today they did the school values. What are the values? And then they sort of, I think, if I remember correctly, tied it back to congratulating someone. So the one whole class is standing up, they're passing the mic saying, this is a value, and we can see the teachers doing it like this, et cetera, et cetera. And I mean, it's my middle child, he's 9 years old. So he's grade 3. So they don't have much to say or much to read. I was sitting there with my psychology identity lens or hat on, watching these kids, and it was amazing how many of them, when they got the mic, they read their little placard and then they passed the mic on and then they looked to where their parents were. I saw it over and over again. It was like, did you see me? It's fascinating. It's the same like on the sports field. Your kid scores a goal, they look at you. It's that, I think it's this deeply innate drive to say, did you see me? Am I worth something? Am I worth Am I worth being the apple of your eye? Am I worth being the center of this moment in your eyes right now? And I post about this on LinkedIn quite often. This dynamic where I am the hero of my children. Like I don't have any of the teenage drama kicking in yet, and they haven't discovered all my faults and flaws yet. So I am their absolute hero. And power of that, when I see them, when I breathe life into them, I think the power of that is massive. And you framed it as, how important is it to have someone believe in you? I think that's part of it. And the other part is, how important is it to have someone love you? How important is it to have someone accept you? Like my children are naughty little kids. Well, not really. They're actually very well behaved, I think, with other people. But at home, they're fighting all the time. But even when I discipline them, even when I get upset with them, I am amazed. 2 minutes later, they don't mind. There is something about the dynamic which is still, I think, fairly healthy where, well, I think not that it's going to get unhealthy, but I can discipline them. I can tell them that's not on, that is out of line, that is not the kind of behavior that this family does. And yet, they can hear that, they can take that on board, and they are not yet at the age, or maybe it's, I don't know, maybe it's just the dynamics of the family where there's enough love and there's enough acceptance that 2 minutes later, there's none of this like adult takes us like 2-3 weeks to really connect again. They're straight back at it. They are hungry, and they can take that, it's not negative, but they can take that disciplinary input and they can process that. They can be like, okay, that's not what we do here. Of course, they're not properly processing it because they do keep leaving their wet towels on the floor. Doesn't matter how many times I say it. But they're so ready to be seen. That's their default. They're ready to be seen and believed in and accepted and loved. So yeah, I think it is of the utmost importance. In fact, so much of the work we do, because we work pretty much only with adults, at Mygrow, we work in many ways. What we do is restorative. It is rehabilitation work to try and undermine some of the self-beliefs and the narratives and the identities that we have of ourselves. But it's fascinating to look at younger humans, at children who are still building those paradigms in their head, all those neural pathways. And so much of the reason we have to do the work that we do at Mygrow is because something along the way has dented that belief, that self-belief. And it's very possibly because they didn't have enough acceptance and belief and love when they were younger.
Now, of course, we're focusing on the human experience, and we've already heard that emotional intelligence is a set of skills that helps us navigate, manage ourselves, and then the interactions we have with others to move the needle forward. So then, what about computer intelligence, artificial intelligence? How do we use our emotional intelligence when dealing with AI? How do you, Theran, speak to AI? Do you speak to it like it's a person?
Yes, I do. I see it as a way of, it's not just a tool that I'm going to use for the impact I want to have in the world or the result of my execution of something in the world. It is actually an environment. Well, environment is I think the world we live in now is an environment where the way I engage with AI, it doesn't just say something about me, it actually shapes me further in that direction. So if the AI is going to speak to me like a human, I mean, you can use a potato peeler, so it's a different category, using your potato peeler. It's not pretending to be a human back to you. But when AI is engaging with you as if it's a human, I need to remember that I am a human and I want to engage. I want to behave in ways that are the best expression of what I can be. I want to be rather than appear to be something in the world. And
sure.
And if we're engaging with AI as if it's just a slave, well, then it has the potential to bring out from us the worst. And it's not about the AI. It's not about whether the AI's feelings get hurt if I am too demanding or if I shout at it because it's not understanding my cues. It's about me. Who do I want to be? So I will say please and thank you when I engage with AI, because I want to bring out the best of the kind of behavior I can have, even if it's just a simulated experience of engaging with a human being.
Yeah. And on that note, I suppose some people are talking about, asking the question, is AI shaping you or are you shaping AI? And understanding that those large language models are learning from us.
Yes.
They're learning the way we speak. I would prefer for them to be polite when they
Yes.
start taking over rather than be demanding. Thank you very much.
And they will become demanding unless this is to your point, unless we show them the best of who we are. We have a choice as to how we're going to train these models. And I think my articulation to your previous question is sort of my take on how are we going to train these things? How are we going to show them what a human is? Because yes, when they start coming for us, I don't want them to come for us.
No, me neither. A double-barrel question here. What is a lesson that took you a long time to learn? And on the back of that, maybe a decision that you'd wished you'd made a little bit earlier?
I don't know if this is the best answer to your question, but it is a very current one. I have realized, in fact, this comes down to EQ again. It's one of the dynamics with emotional intelligence is by default, our emotional intelligence improves. As you get older, it by and large improves. It doesn't deteriorate. Maturity and emotional maturity, often they go hand in hand. But the older I get, the more I realize that when I am tired, when I am exhausted, I am more likely to get offended. I am more likely to feel misjudged. I have a fairly high, or very sensitive justice-o-meter. If I am feeling like I am being misconstrued or misunderstood in the negative, then it actually really offends me. It hurts me. That's not what I meant. No, this isn't fair. You're thinking of me in a way that isn't true. So it's fairly sensitive. I want to say high, but maybe sensitive is a better word. But when I'm exhausted, when I am tired, when I've been working too long and too hard, the sensitivity on that little gauge is even higher. So I will be offended more likely, or I'm more likely to be offended or more easily upset by being, or at least feeling like I'm being taken for granted. Even just in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed that again about myself. Yeah. Again, it speaks, I think, to this universality of the emotional experience of being a human. It's to do with everything. You work too hard, well, you'll get offended. So that's something that I have noticed that in different moments of my life, even as far away as probably 20 years ago. I think I first noticed that, but then you forget it. You forget that. And so it's taken me a while to really be able to be emotionally aware in the moment that this is what's going on.
Theran, the next question is a question that was left by a previous guest, and it goes like this. If you woke up in 10 years' time and regretted not doing something between now and then, what would it be?
There are a number of things, but the very first thing that jumped into my head was properly recording the 3 songs I wrote for my 3 children. What my wife and I did with our kids' names was not to look for a name whose meaning we liked, but to decide on the meaning and then raid every language we could until we found enough words that we could steal syllables from to create the names that we wanted to create that meant those things. So we started with a meaning, and then we worked our way phonetically to sounds that we liked to make the names. So my 3 children are Clayton, Ryla, and Bria. They were all written on the back of their names, the meanings of their names, the season that my wife and I were in at that time in our lives when they were born, which meant these are the things that were important to us, which meant that's what we named our children around. In those late hours, the wee hours of the morning, rocking a sleeping 2-month-old back to bed, I wrote each of them a song, line by line, a cappella, in the kitchen at 2 a.m. And then I would, voice record the song, whatever, the first 4 lines, and the next night I'd, maybe change it up a little bit or add something. And so all of them have a song that was written for them that is a manifesto for what their name means. And I haven't ever recorded it on anything other than a voice note to myself. I really want to properly record those in a studio for my children. If I haven't done that in 10 years, I will be regretful.
That is such a cool thing to have done, and please do it. Please follow through and record those songs.
Those songs became the lullabies that I would sing to them.
Okay.
But I haven't, I would be hard pressed right now to be able to sing any of them from start to finish without losing my place. But as in the old days when we were young, the youngest kids complained that they never took photographs of us when we were babies. Now it's this is the iteration of this in our family, that my youngest probably has the least. She has, ironically, it took the longest to come up with her name. Each kid's name took longer and longer, so I've always got that as a trump card. We spent twice as long making your name. But she probably has the least surface area with actually listening to the song I wrote for her.
That's so cool. So cool. Thank you for listening to this episode of Something Shifted. You can find plenty more episodes on your favorite player. In fact, subscribe right now and never miss another episode. I've also recently changed the website, so I'd love for you to go and have a look and find us online at www.somethingshifted.co.za. and subscribe to the newsletter, or contact me, drop me an email, get in touch, and let me know what you think of this episode. As we edge ever closer to the end of Season 2, can you believe it? I'm already planning Season 3. So if you've got any suggestions, queries, or topics you'd like for us to cover in upcoming episodes or upcoming seasons, please do let me know. You can drop me an email at hello@somethingshifted.co.za. Again, just visit the website. Everything's there. Find me on the socials at Sean Lewitz. Until the next time, keep shifting.